Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. Jay Phillips, 107.5, The Game in South Carolina, good enough to give us a few minutes to preview the Gamecocks. Does so now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Jay, thanks for the time. How are you?
Good, Hunt. How are you, buddy? Hope y'all did okay after everything that came through last night.
Yeah, everything good. It kept shifting east, and New Orleans got hit a little bit harder than we thought it was going to. But Baton Rouge, I think, made out okay, so we certainly do appreciate that. Now all eyes on the weekend and some football. What did this past weekend do for the energy around South Carolina's football program as they went up there and hammered Kentucky?
Yeah, you talk about a dichotomy in weeks. I mean, I know South Carolina beat Old Dominion, and quite honestly, man, you know, as this program continues to be rebuilt by Shane Beamer, I try to caution Carolina fans, don't qualify wins too often. You know, I know they were a heavy favorite, but ODU had shown that they had, been able to play with some pretty good teams. And Carolina, it was such a new-look offense, even though Dowell Loggins is still the OC, but you got a different kind of quarterback, a whole bunch of new receivers, some new starters up front, a new tailback. They were gonna struggle a little bit. And then you go to Kentucky. You're a 10-point underdog. Kentucky had done well in 40 minutes of play against Southern Miss. And South Carolina just dominated them. I mean, they really did, man. And so the energy levels for fans have been like, well, is the Kentucky game the truth, or was the Old Dominion game the truth? Honestly, man, I think it's somewhere in between. And now with the Tigers coming to town this weekend, it presents an incredibly different challenge because with all due respect to Kentucky, LSU is loads more talented than the Wildcats.
What was the most surprising thing that South Carolina was able to do against Kentucky?
Well, I mean, it just they quite literally, man, and I know people can be a little loose with that word, but they made Kentucky stop throwing the football. I mean, at one point in the second quarter, Kentucky ran 18 straight times, and then by the third quarter, after Carolina made it 24-6, it took Vandegrift out because he still couldn't throw. He was 3 of 10. I mean, I can't recall seeing a team, Hunt, so voluntarily, on Kentucky I'm talking about, seem to just throw up the white flag like that, especially in a home game. I mean, South Carolina just so thoroughly dominated them in terms of pass rush that they gave up on it. And by the time they did, it almost, I don't really mean this, but it almost felt like they gave up on the game.
It was something to watch, and obviously Stewart and Kennard have gotten a lot of talk down here as the two edge players for South Carolina, the true freshman star, Stewart, and then Kennard, who's a transfer from Georgia Tech. I talked about them in the first segment of my show today because I think the matchup between those two guys and then Will Campbell and Emory Jones here at LSU is going to be fascinating. How do you see that shaking out?
I completely agree with you, and I talked to your cohort, Matt Moscona, on my show yesterday. I know he feels the same way. I wonder if those things cancel each other out, if you will, what that means for the Gamecocks. And let me explain. Yeah, at this point, LSU has not given up a sack. South Carolina has 10. You just mentioned the two tackles for LSU, first-round picks, going to make a lot of money. And Kennard and Stewart have been very good. And there is a lot of depth in the middle of the Gamecock defensive line, too, to try to occupy a lot of those guys. So I'll be curious to see early. I think, LSU is talented enough, experienced enough, especially at those two tackle spots, to want to go one-on-one against those guys. If you need to add a little extra with a tight end or something like that, we'll find out those things. But if it seems to get to a point to where LSU may need to double one of those guys, what does that do for South Carolina? If they don't need to, what does that mean for South Carolina? So I guess I come around again to if those things cancel each other out, I think that's advantage LSU.
Does South Carolina have secondary play that can run with LSU's receivers? Because LSU's going to throw it a ton in this game. That's just what their offensive identity's been through 2 weeks.
Yeah, and obviously Nussmeier's been fantastic at what he's doing. O'Donnell Fortune, yes. Judge Collier is coming around. He's not quite as experienced. Bakari Swain is a freshman from over in the Atlanta area. He's coming around as a pretty good guy out there. But, again, if I'm LSU, I am certainly testing that quickly. And, again, that comes back around to our previous question, which is the Gamecock pass rush and trying to at least disrupt the flow. I mean, I think Nussmeier has been good at getting the ball out quickly, and that, that could negate a lot of what South Carolina has done well right now. Again, if he's got enough time where he is consistently comfortable, again, that's advantage LSU.
Jay Phillips, our guest, 107.5 The Game in South Carolina, LSU, and the Gamecocks. 11 o'clock Central Time on Saturday from Williams-Brice Stadium. Let's talk about the offense. Spencer Rattler's down here in New Orleans now. Lenore Sellers has taken over. What kind of player is he?
Week one, definitely jittery. He's admitted it in postgame, in his weekly press conference last week. So has his head coach. So has his offensive coordinator. And last week, they settled down. Now, look, Carolina hadn't thrown the ball very much. I think you've thrown it, if I do my math right, 39 total times this season. 10 of 23 in the first game, 12 of 16 in the second game. So obviously last week, a lot more efficient. They did confuse the Kentucky defense. They did really have some nice play calls. And honestly, too, man, in game one, it wasn't a completely like just jitters or anything else like that. I just don't think they executed very well. And this past week against UK, they were better at that part of it. A lot of fans wanted to say, oh, those are terrible play calls. Well, any of us know that have followed football at any level, the best play call can look like crap if you don't execute. And I think they've done a better job of that. They've still got some issues up front. And I know LSU's defensive line might not be as strong as it was with Guillory done now, but it's still loaded. Carolina gave up 12 tackles for loss last week, and Lenoris has been under some duress. He handled that duress better last week against UK, which I think is a positive because they were far more talented than ODU. This is probably more debatable, man, but that Kentucky front has a lot of dudes that are also going to play at the next level. I know LSU does as well. So did Carolina see something a lot more similar from a talent perspective last weekend that they'll see this weekend to at least allow those guys up front for the Gamecocks to have a little more confidence, perhaps? But Lenoris is coming around, and if you flush him hard out of the pocket, he can run, and he's a big boy. He's nearly 250 pounds, man, so he can take a lick.
Rocket Sanders, a name that LSU fans very familiar with from his time at Arkansas, coming off of injury. How has he looked through 2 weeks?
Good, not great, but I don't think that's all on him. Again, that offensive line is trying to come together and give him more opportunity. Last week, he averaged 4.2 per carry, so that's strong, but I think he gained just over 50 yards. Didn't need a lot of offense last week, the way the defense was playing, so that was something to look for. And I think Carolina, the talk around here, and you can help me out with this, that Nichols was able to find some holes and run on LSU. So certainly that's the film that Carolina will be watching and try to exploit whatever, those weaknesses may have been, last weekend at Death Valley. But he's been good. Everybody says he's fully healthy, ready to go. He will need, I think, to be a guy that protects Lenoris in terms of pass blocking when he's not asked to run the football. But so far he's carried the early load, but they've been good. But they have not been maybe as ideal as you would like.
And for LSU, I think the question will be answered on Saturday whether or not the Nichols game was a lack of performance or just a lack of want to against an FCS team, because it was discouraging from a defensive perspective. But sometimes there's a letdown there after a USC game in Vegas, and you come back and play an FCS team here in Tiger Stadium. So it'll be interesting to see. South Carolina, Juice Wells is in Oxford. Xavier Legette now is with the Carolina Panthers. Have they kind of restocked the shelves on the outside?
They absolutely have, and I think that's another issue, excuse, reason, and that depends on somebody's subjective point of view, I think, when you assess a football team. But in terms of returning production, there was very little at the receiver spot, and they did bring in some guys. Jared Brown had a nice career at Coastal Carolina. Grayson McCall left for NC State. Jared came here. He was his top target last year. You got a true freshman from here in South Carolina named Mazio Bennett, who had a nice week last week up at UK. I think there's a good rapport that's developing between him and Lenoris. Dre Jacobs is a transfer from Florida State. They like him a lot. And, of course, there's the speedster, Nick Harbor, who has not factored in as much as of yet. I still think there are things from a wide receiver scheme standpoint that Nick is still learning. He very limited action last year as a freshman, did not go through spring because he's a track star, so he ran track for South Carolina and for Team USA in the spring and summer. So he really only got back to football camp in August, and I think there are still some growing pains, I suppose. They want to get him more involved, and I expect to see him a little more this weekend. Maybe you find a way to get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, see what can happen. That's just me guessing, but they've got to find a way to get him because, again, he's a big guy. And if he can get going full speed, man, he's going to be very difficult to take down. But right now, I think a lot of what he needs to do without the football is still causing some, not problems, but just concerns in terms of how to keep him out there. You can only keep a guy out there as a decoy for so long before a defense, especially a team like LSU, is going to go, hey, they're not throwing to him.
If it came down to a 42-yard field goal from the hash, how would South Carolina feel about that?
Good. Alex Herrera is 4 for 5 this season. His long miss was 48 yards. He had the leg. He just missed it wide. That was against Old Dominion. He only had to kick once last week in terms of a field goal, and it was a chip shot, I think 20-something yards. But he made a couple over 40. So he's a sixth-year kid. He was behind Mitch Jeter, who transferred to Notre Dame for his final season. Alex has the leg. Does he have the accuracy? But I think if it was under 45, they feel good. Maybe you go above that line and you start to maybe grit your teeth a little bit more.
How big a weekend is this for the South Carolina football program with game day coming to town?
Well, it's big, man. And Carolina's had their share of very big games in the past, certainly in the Steve Spurrier and Lou Holt eras. You had some big ones with Georgia and Clemson and schools like that, an SEC East showdown against Florida one time when Spurrier was still down there and Holtz was here. But it's been 10 years since game day has come to town. Last time they were here, Carolina lost by a point to Missouri. I remember that game, and it was terrible that Steve said he forgot to go for 2. It was one of the more odd things that a brilliant play caller would admit to you. But in terms of what Shane's trying to do, this is a big deal. And it caught a lot of us by surprise. When I saw that at around, 9 o'clock Saturday night, I was like, wait, what? They coming here? I figured they'd go to Wisconsin, Alabama or something like that. So it's a big deal, man. And a win would be huge because you should, at that point, feel very good about trying to start September 4-0. And then the next game you got is Ole Miss. Even if you don't win this one, it's a big deal in terms of the spotlight. And you should still at least finish 3-1 in September with Ole Miss coming next. So after Akron. So it's a big day. If it rains, and I think we're going to get some of the remnants of what y'all are getting, and I don't know how much that changes things too. But in terms of the excitement level, trust me, man, it's getting near a 10.
Jay, we appreciate some time. Enjoy the football this weekend.
All right, guys. Anytime.
He is Jay Phillips, 107.5 The Game in South Carolina. Good enough to talk a little bit of Gamecock football with us here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.